Okay, it looks like people might trickle in here and there, but for the most part, we're ready to go. Hello, everybody. My name is Leah Adrian. I am part of Austin Development Services in the Stakeholder and Communications group. And today we are going to have the engagement over small tree fees. And for the format, we're going to have the presentation followed by a Q&A session. When we get to that Q&A session, if you would like to speak, you just raise your hand and we'll unmute you. If you do have questions throughout the presentation, there's a Q&A box. It should be bottom right of the bar in Zoom. You are welcome to drop those in throughout the presentation. We'll ask that you put them in there instead of the chat because it captures them better for us. If you have any kind of technical difficulties, anything like that, you're welcome to use the chat. But in general, the Q&A box is best. So with that, I'll go ahead and hand it over to our team that will be giving the presentation. So Daniel, I'll pass it to you.
All right, thank you, Leah. Hello, I'm Daniel Priest. I work with the City Arborist program, and I've got City Arborist Naomi Rotremel and Community Tree Division Manager Jim Demkowski on the call as well. So we're going to go through kind of an introduction to the pilot program we have developed related to a credit or refund on fees related to preservation of small trees on your development sites. And so here's our agenda. We're going to look at the kind of the initial council resolution that directed staff to initiate this program. Talk a little bit about the pilot, some of the elements, how the program aligns with council direction, and then we'll get into a Q&A session and hopefully have some time for some good discussion. So without further ado, the context here is in November 2024, Austin City Council passed this resolution. We're not going to go into the whole text of it, but in broad outline, it directed the city manager to create a credit per caliper inch of appropriate trees preserved between 8 and 18 inches on a residential lot to be applied toward development fees. So the idea here is we want to find a way to incentivize the preservation of trees that are too small to be regulated. And so this is a program that applies specifically to single family development. This is not something that is applicable if you're working in site plan. So this is specific to single family development. And the idea here is we want to give people an incentive to preserve these smaller trees, things that are less than 19 inches. Normally, these tend to be the first things that are cut down on a site. We've received, feedback over the years, from, folks who are reporting that, people come in, if you got a tree that's 17 inches on your site, first thing you do is you cut it down because you don't want it to grow up to the point that it's regulated. And so this is a way of actually turning those smaller trees into something that is an asset for the site and something that has the potential to offset some or even all of your development fees in some cases. So we're calling this the Small Tree Fee Credit. This is a pilot program we were working on. And in very broad outline, kind of already went over this. So the idea here is that we are offsetting your development fees in exchange for preservation of these small trees. So talking through applicability, what does this apply to? What does this not apply to? So this is any single family lot where you have a qualifying small tree present. The amount of the credit is based upon the diameter of the enrolled trees and on the density of the development. We're going to get into kind of the weeds on some of this, but broadly speaking, we're looking at the size of the trees. And then we are also looking at how dense is the development. One of the components of the council resolution was to look at if it was necessary to have different rates of the reimbursement or the credit depending upon how many units are on the site. The thinking here is that if you're building like a single residential unit on the site, you're more likely to have more space, and so it requires less incentive to give you that incentive to preserve the small trees. The more dense the site is, the harder it is to preserve small trees, and so the amount of the credit should go up. So the credit does not apply across the board. It is going to apply to most review and inspection fees. It is capped per project at the total cost of those fees. And so it's not going to apply to revision fees. This doesn't apply for expedited review if you'd opt to go through expedited. Any fees that are incurred as a result of a violation, it's not going to apply to those, and it's not going to apply to any reinspection fees. So this is, but in terms of your initial review, it is going to apply to, if you're creating a new residential unit on a site, it's going to apply to, basically all your review fees, and then all your standard inspection fees. Anything that is kind of a standard fee is going to be covered by this. Well, there'll be a kind of an exhaustive list of fee codes that qualify and don't qualify. But like I say, we're not going to get into the weeds on that in this presentation. The broad outline, it's development fees, but excluding these right here. So in general, to qualify for the credit, the trees that you enroll in the project, anytime you see me refer to enrolled trees in this presentation, enrolled trees refer to small trees underneath that 19-inch threshold that have been basically you're planning to preserve for this credit or for this refund. And so those are what we are called enrolled trees. So any of your enrolled trees have to be treated as if they were regulated trees, and they're going to need to meet preservation criteria at the end of the project in order to receive the credit. So the way this will run as a refund process, basically on the fees that were submitted, either during review or at permit activation. And so you won't receive that refund until the end of the project, but that's how that's working. So this is going to be a pilot program for fiscal 2026. We'll be tracking this and reporting kind of on progress at the end of the program. At that point, City Council will decide, kind of how they want to proceed with that. But as a pilot program, it'll be operating for fiscal 2026. So a few definitions here. So you will see these used both in this presentation, and this is also kind of in all of the documentation around this program. These are the terms that you should be familiar with. So the first of these is we will refer to small tree, anything that is inch or greater, but less than 19 inches. Is a small tree. So these are the trees that qualify for the credit. I will flag that in the initial direction for council, they specified 8 to 18.9, but we actually, partly on the basis of feedback from some of our stakeholders, we decided to lower this to, basically if it's a small tree, it ought to qualify for the credit. So a regulated tree, this is going to refer to any tree that is already subject to our regulations. So on site plan or on a single family residential, this is going to refer to both protected and heritage trees. We just refer to those collectively as a regulated tree. An enrolled tree is any small tree that has been approved for this fee credit kind of on your development plan. So you've submitted your building permit application, and as part of the building permit application, you've indicated that you want to participate in this program. So you go through that process. At the end of the review process, whenever your plans are approved, you will have the list of trees that you submitted that we're like, yes, these are going to meet preservation criteria. They are enrolled. So enrolled just means these are the trees that we are planning to preserve. And if you follow through on that, you'll get your refund. So enrolled inches is just the combined diameter of all enrolled trees. And then the enrolled credit is the dollar value of all the enrolled inches on an application. And so these are just different ways of talking about, the trees that have been enrolled in this. Your maximum credit is the total value of all qualifying fees on an application. So the maximum credit doesn't refer to the trees. The maximum credit refers to your, to the fees. So if you were to look at all of the fees, all of your review fees, your inspection fees that qualify for the program, if you were to total all those up, that is your maximum credit. So the enrolled credit might end up being less than the maximum credit. It might actually be more than the maximum credit. We'll talk about that. Or, it might end up that, it matches exactly the maximum credit. So the enrolled credit and the maximum credit going to have to do with, whether or not you qualify, how much of your fees are you going to qualify for? So moving on into applicability, we're going to talk about what trees that you can enroll in the small tree fee credit. So the criteria here is, one, the tree has got to be on a lot that is zoned single family. The tree is on a lot where a new residence is constructed. So important point here, remodels, additions, and non-residential structures do not qualify for the credit. This is specific to if you're putting a new residence on the property. This could be, if you're, got an existing single family structure, you're adding an ADU in the back, then yes, that qualifies. We're looking at the number of new residential structures. The third criteria, the tree has to meet the qualifying trees criteria listed in Environmental Criteria Manual 354B2A. What that refers to is the section of the criteria manual where we talk about preservation of trees, small trees for mitigation credit, which is a different thing than this. But we're applying the same qualifying trees criteria. Broadly speaking, this means that it has to be a species that is on Appendix F. It's a native or well-adapted species for our area, and it has to be free of any defects, any big problems with the tree. So, if you submit a tree that's kind of is already on its way out, or it's got major structural defects, or it's something like on our mitigation exempt list, you can't submit like a Chinaberry for credit under the program. But if it's a qualifying species and it meets the other criteria that we would apply for preservation of small trees for mitigation credit, then it qualifies. The other thing is the tree is not being preserved for mitigation credit. So I know a lot of you probably are already familiar with this, but just kind of for context here, we have an existing provision in our criteria manual related to mitigation. So mitigation is the term we use for, you've received permission to cut down a tree, but you're required to replant new trees to make up for the removal of that tree. Replanting is kind of our standard mitigation option, but we also have fee in lieu if your site can't support the number of trees. But the other option we have is we already have a provision that you can preserve those small trees and get credit towards your required mitigation. And so I'm giving you that context because any tree that is being used for the mitigation credit can't be used for the fee credit program, and vice versa. You got to choose which one you want it to apply to, and depending on your site, different things may make more sense. One thing, obviously, one advantage of the fee credit program that we're talking about today is that this is potentially useful for you even on sites where you don't owe mitigation, right? Mitigation only applies if you're developing a site and you have received permission to remove a tree, and it's the tree is not isn't diseased or hazardous or anything. It's so you might have mitigation there, and so you can you take advantage of the mitigation credit. But on a site with no mitigation required, you would not normally be able to take advantage of that mitigation credit. With this fee credit, you can have an incentive to preserve those small trees. So in terms of program limits, the pilot program is authorized through September 30th of this year. No applications claiming the small tree fee credit will be accepted after that date. So no more than $50,000 in fee credits may be claimed during the pilot program. So we do have a program cap on the program. When the credit limit is reached, we will notify stakeholders. No new applications claiming the fee credit will be accepted. So if we, and we're just kind of checking the boxes here so that you know what the process will be on the off chance that you happen to be submitting your application right as we're getting close to that limit. If we have multiple applications that are claiming the fee under review at the time that the credit limit is reached, applications are going to be prioritized by the actual date of the application. And kind of process-wise, the way to think of this is, you've got a permit application that building permit application where you're claiming the small tree fee credit. You submit that. And then it goes through, and then it's got to go through the review cycle. Those inches are not actually enrolled until your permit is approved, right? And so there is, for if we have multiple applications kind of in that in between phase, kind of you've submitted the permit application, but you haven't received your approved permit, then for anything that's kind of in that area, if the fee runs out, we're going to prioritize the applications by the date of application. If you are in review, you'll be notified if the application no longer qualifies for the fee credit because the program limit has been exceeded. And if that's the case, and you need to revise the plans, we're not going to charge you, you'll be given the opportunity to revise, to update that without incurring an additional fee for the update. So in terms of getting into kind of the weeds of how we calculate this credit, so there's a lot here, so we're going to move slow and kind of break it down. The amount of the enrolled credit starts at $100 per enrolled inch. So if you're preserving, one 12-inch tree, call it a 12-inch live oak, we're going to it's going to start at $1,200 for that tree. However, because we need to account for the higher level of incentive to, based on the density of the site, that $100 is then going to be multiplied by this table below here. So the density modifier is determined by the total number of both new and existing residential structures on the lot. So if you've got, and this is important because if you've got an existing single family home and you're adding an ADU, even though your building permit is only for one structure, the density challenges have to account for the fact that there's already a residential unit there. And so in that case, it would qualify for a 1.5 multiplier. If you were 3 structures, then we multiply by 2. And so this would be basically the more dense it is, the higher the multiplier. The other thing I want to flag is if the lot was created by a subdivision under Home 2, the density modifier is going to be determined by the number of lots that were created by the subdivision of the original lot. And so that's may feel kind of out of left field, but kind of to back up and kind of get some context for this, under kind of standard residential development rules, you've got your standard lot size. Home 2 allows you to subdivide those lots into smaller parcels than was previously the case. We don't want, if someone is going through Home 2 rather than through Home 1 in order to kind of increase with a higher level of, or to develop with a higher level of density, we want to make sure that we're not disincentivizing the Home 2 option, just because in that case you're creating these individual lots. And so if the subdivision was developed under Home 2, instead of looking at the number of residences, we're looking at the number of lots that were created by the subdivision of the original lot. So that's just to make sure that we don't have any perverse incentives related, kind of associated with the use of Home 2. So the maximum credit, as we discussed earlier, is going to be the total of all qualifying fees on a project. Qualifying fees will be provided, and they're going to correspond to the approved fee schedule for this fiscal year. The amount of credit that you receive at the end of the project is going to be the lesser of the maximum credit and the enrolled credit. So you've got we've got an example here coming up, so I'll wait to kind of go over that. So in terms of how you apply for the credit, there's going to be a program enrollment form that will be available on the City Arborist page. Here's the address. So you will review the program conditions, sign the form, and include it with the documentation submitted with your application. And then if you are participating in the program, that is going to trigger a tree review, even if you don't have any regulated trees on the lot. So you've got a lot that, doesn't have any regulated trees, but it's got, say, a 10-inch cedar elm and, a 15-inch sycamore that you want to have as part of the credit program. the fact that you want to participate in the program means that there will be a tree review added to the to the application. Of course, the fee credit will apply to the fees associated with that tree review, along with everything else. But it does have to go through tree review if you're wanting to participate in the program. So right here, so we'll have another version of this table on the kind of the enrollment documentation, kind of for your reference whenever you submit. Basically, you're going to want to include on your plans what we're calling the small tree fee credit calculation table. And so, it's going to look something like this. The main thing is that we want to have every tree that is listed on that's shown on the plans to be preserved is also going to be shown on this table right here. So this is different than a table for, any table associated with your regulated trees. This is going to be a separate table. So basically you'll give the species, the trunk diameter, as many rows as you need for however many trees you're wanting to include. Those are going to total up to your enrolled inches. And then you're going to include the times 100, and then your density multiplier, like we say, is going to be based upon the total number of units on the site at the end of the project, and then that's going to give you your total here. So, for example here, we got somebody got 4 trees here. They have an existing house. They're adding an ADU, so that's why the density multiplier of 1.5 applies. You can see here, we're looking at the diameters of all these trees. And then we are, kind of going through this process with a total enrolled credit of $4,800. In terms of on your plans themselves, basically you're going to treat small trees you want to include in the credit program. All the rules for plan depictions that apply to regulated trees are going to apply to these as well. And that's generally across the board. Anything related to preservation criteria or plan depictions, the thing to remember is treat the small trees that you want to enroll in the program exactly like you would a regulated tree. So I alluded to this earlier, but this is what we're calling over enrollment of trees. So applicants can choose to enroll a number of inches that is actually greater than the maximum credit. So this can be useful. Say you've got some enrolled trees that something happens during the construction, the tree is damaged, it doesn't meet preservation at the end of the project. So if you've got, so in that previous example, we had a total of $4,800 worth of enrolled credit. Let's say you've got only $3,000 worth, your maximum credit for the site is $3,000. You total up all your qualifying fees, and it's actually less than your enrolled credit. Where that is helpful for you is if some of those trees don't meet preservation at the end of the project, normally you would be required to go for a revision to update the, kind of what's on the plans showing as preserved so that we can adjust the fee credit. We have to go and make those changes. If you have enrolled enough trees that even after the trees that didn't meet preservation are accounted for, your enrolled credit still exceeds your maximum credit, then in that event you don't need a revision, right? Because all of the numbers still add up from kind of from the credit standpoint. And so there's a strong incentive, I think, to over enroll trees if you have them available, because what it can do is it gives you some leeway, it gives you some flexibility to avoid and to deal with a revision at the end of the process if it doesn't all add up. So that is in broad outline kind of what the idea of the over enrollment is. All right, Leah, let's go to the next slide. So getting into construction requirements, like I said, this is the short version for this is you want to think about these small trees exactly as you would a regulated tree. Small trees have to be surveyed and depicted on plans, same as you would a regulated tree. These trees have to meet standard preservation criteria, just like any other tree. And then the small trees have to be protected through construction in accordance with the requirements for regulated trees. And then at the end of the project, you have to show that they met preservation criteria. So there is one exception to the just like regulated trees, and that is that the in council's directive to us, they specified that there shouldn't be any additional inspections associated with these small trees. And so if you've got an environmental inspection, looking at your tree protection, and all of your regulated trees pass, and your small trees and one of your small trees doesn't, your inspector is going to make a note about that for you so that you can correct it, but they're not going to fail you. There's not going to be a reinspection for that. And so what you'll need to do is just to communicate with them, take a picture, whatever your inspector, kind of how they want to handle that. But we're specifically trying to avoid incurring any additional reinspection fees associated with these. Just, bear in mind that at the end of the project, if there's been any deficiencies noted, you need to have shown that they were addressed so that you can show that the trees meet preservation. But we're not going to charge additional inspection fees associated with that. Let's see. All right, next slide, please. Yeah. Oh, all right. Got ahead of myself. I forgot some of these I broke out onto a separate slide. So just covered the reinspection there. And then opt out, you can, if for some reason during construction you discover, it's not going to it's not worth the trouble of preserving these trees, you can always opt out, right? There's not a penalty per se associated with that, but it does require a revision to take them off of your plans. That's the only thing there. But apart from, but you can leave the program at any time that you would like. That'll be an option for you. Next slide, please. So in terms of receiving the credit, like I say, at the end of the project, your enrolled trees will be evaluated, kind of at your final environmental tree inspection, to make sure that they, met the preservation criteria, that any deficiencies had been addressed. If an enrolled tree does not meet a preservation criteria, you will need a plan revision to update the plans and the amount of the enrolled credit. This is just like the process that currently exists if you're preserving small trees for mitigation credit. We just have to make sure that the plan, everything adds up at the end of the project. But like I say, if the site has been over enrolled and the number of preserved inches meets or exceeds the value of the enrolled credit, then you don't have to worry about the revision. We are kind of making that allowance there. And then the builder will be provided a questionnaire to evaluate their experience with the small tree fee credit. Like I say, this is a pilot program. One of the things we are doing with this is gathering kind of feedback, kind of information on how this goes so that we can report back to council and see, do they want to continue the program? Do they want to make changes to do they want to tweak the program? They're looking for feedback to know kind of how they want to, what to proceed with kind of on a permanent basis. And so before we can release, kind of the refund, we will need that feedback form. Next question. So like I say, if the enrolled credit is equal to or exceeds the maximum credit for the project, all qualifying fees will be refunded. If the enrolled credit is less than the maximum credit, fees are going to be refunded based on the date they were paid, but with the most recent fees refunded first. So, we, in a case like this, we have to, have some, kind of some rule of thumb for where we're, kind of the direction we're going, like which fees get priority. And so, since a lot of the what really determines whether or not the trees survive is the active construction phase. That's why we're starting with the most recent and moving backwards. We want to make sure that whoever was paying the fees related to the inspections is included in the the refund if at all possible. If we're doing it in the other direction, it's possible you might have a situation where the incentive ran the wrong direction. The person who's actually building the house doesn't have any personal, kind of incentive there. So that's why we're starting with most recent fees and moving backwards. And then in most cases, the fees are going to be refunded to the party that paid the fee using the method by which the fee was paid. That's a general principle. There will be exceptions to this. Those will be handled by city policy, kind of on a case by case basis. Generally, I mean, most people are paying their fees with a credit card. If you're paid with a credit card, it's going to be refunded to the credit card that was used for that was used to pay that particular fee. So that is how it'll work in most cases. If you've got kind of a special case, payment with a money order or something, then that's something that we'll kind of handle on a case by case basis. And you can reach out to us, let us know about that at the time that you kind of enroll the trees, and we can provide a little more guidance in terms of what you can expect at the end of the process. So, but like I say, as a general rule of thumb, it's refunded to whoever paid the fee using the method they used to pay it. All right, next slide. All right, so that's the end of the presentation portion. Went through that pretty quick, so we got time for Q&A. Jump over here. So starting at the top, Claire, I believe I answered your question. Mark asks, can the fee credit program be used in conjunction with mitigation credit trees so long as there are enough qualifying smaller trees on the site? Yes. The individual trees can't double dip, but if you've got enough small trees to both take advantage of the fee credit and the mitigation credit, then yeah, you can use both. I just want to be careful to have that clearly noted on your application to avoid any confusion. But yeah, the double dipping applies to the trees, not to the project as a whole. The more incentive we can provide to preserve these small trees, the better, as far as we're concerned. Next question, why are expedited review fees excluded from the credit? So that was in response actually to some feedback we had received from stakeholders whenever we kind of had our first kind of a round of stakeholder engagement with this. And the concern there was that because we have a limited pool of funds to use for this pilot program, expedited fees are so much, kind of tend to be more expensive than kind of standard review. And the concern was that it would be really easy to burn through a whole bunch of the pilot program fees in much fewer cases. And so that's why we excluded those. Let's see. I don't have complete list of the fees eligible for credit in the pilot program. We will share that after the presentation. But yeah, I don't have that with the computer issues I'm having. I don't want to try to poke around and pull that up right now.
And if you guys do have if you do have other questions, if you want to ask your question, just raise your hand and we can do that too. There are some really good questions here in the Q&A.
Yeah. Let's see. And Leah, if you want to, I think I'd answered Claire's question as well. If you want to mark that one as answered. Let's see. Charlotte asks, is there a minimum diameter for a tree to qualify? Yes, 1 inch. Like I say, and what I will say is that if you have a 1 inch tree to preserve, there is going to be an expense associated with protecting the tree and accounting for it. And so there will be a point where we leave this for y'all to make obviously you're free to make your own calculations on this. If you're just trying to preserve a 1 inch tree, it's probably not, the math's probably not going to pencil out on that, but that is y'all's call to make. 1 inch diameter and up can be preserved. Again, the responsibility is on you to make sure that these really small trees do meet preservation criteria. But we will enroll it inch and up if you are interested in making the effort. Let's see. Juan Pablo asks, are all species eligible? So all species that are on Appendix F in the Environmental Criteria Manual are eligible. Actually, Naomi, do you want to drop the link to Appendix F just for ease of reference? But yeah, I mean, basically, this is the same. If you've gone through the kind of the process of like mitigation planting with the city, the list of trees that are eligible for inclusion in the program is the same list of trees that are eligible for mitigation credit. Let's see. All right, Humair asks, if we preserve the tree, it becomes protected, right? It does not. So this is something else that was flagged for us kind of in the stakeholder engagement process. And it's, I mean, basically the way our ordinance is written, the only thing that makes a tree protected is the diameter. So if it's less than 19 inches, it is not protected. This is the same actually as mitigation plantings. If you plant any mitigation trees that you plant, they also don't become protected. So no, if you preserve the tree, it is not going to become protected. It's not something that once you get the certificate of occupancy, then it is subject to the same regulations that any other tree that size would be subject to. If that is, and one of the things that we are trying to gather is concerns that, stakeholders may have about different aspects of the program. I know that, like I said, that's one that was already flagged. So definitely feel free if you also have concerns about that aspect of it, then definitely reach out to us and let us know so we can document that for council, because that's that particular point is not one that we can address administratively. It would require council action. But yeah, it is not protected if it is once you get your certificate of occupancy. Jack, can you give an example of the dollar amount of credit per caliper inch for a single family residence? Just a basic example, maybe 10-inch healthy live oak or cedar elm. Sure. Yeah, I had a table in there, but it can be kind of tricky to go over. So let's say you've got you got one 10-inch live oak on a site that you were looking to build. Let's say this is for just to make the math easy. Well, we'll do this. We'll take a couple of versions of this. So you're building a single, residential unit on an empty site, and you got this 10-inch live oak that you want to preserve. So the basic credit amount is $100 per inch of credit. So that would get you, so that 10-inch tree would be worth $1,000 worth of credit. And then we look at your density modifier. If you don't have an existing structure and you're building one structure, then your density multiplier is 1. So it doesn't increase at all. So in that event, the enrolled value of that tree would be $1,000. Now let's say this is a case of you're putting on 3 units, right? You're coming in, you're wanting to get as many units on the site as possible. So the basic rate remains the same. It's $1,000 for a 10-inch tree, but the density modifier, if you got 3 or more units, is a multiplier of by 2. So in that case, that same tree is worth $2,000 in the more dense scenario. And then if you got, if there was one additional, if it was going to be 2 units, that's the in between, that's 1.5. So in that case, that tree would be worth $1,500. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of context. It's we're looking at between 1,000 and 2,000 for a 10-inch tree, depending on density. Let's see. So Humir says, we protect it during construction, but after a certificate of occupancy, no need for protection. That is correct. Yeah, and that's also, and that right there, if you're talking about protection in the sense of, having your fence up, your mulch and whatever, that would also be pretty standard for regulated trees. Once you get your CO, there's not any need for any of that protection either. But yeah. All right, so that is all of our open questions. Want to see, I see Naomi. We had a question about the qualifying species. Naomi just posted the link to Appendix F. You can check that for kind of to go over and let's see what species qualify. If anybody has additional questions, you want to raise your hand, come on camera, or leave your camera off, and just let's hear your voice. We've got another 15 minutes or so on the presentation.
And just as the kind of the end of the administrative points, I just put up this presentation again. There's a post-engagement survey. If you have any feedback specifically for the engagement itself, please feel free to use that QR code to go to that survey so we can get feedback about how we're doing with the presentation itself.
So we got another question from Charlotte. What if a tree is on the neighbor's property, but its CRZ is on yours? Can you get credit for it? No, the tree has to be located on your property to receive credit for it. And then one more question. When is the program live? Could project currently in permitting add this? So we're looking to go live at the end of the month. There's a couple of technical things that are getting wrapped up right now. So we're looking at either the 23rd or the 30th. In terms of could project currently in permitting add this? If you, let's see, well, there's one question that we have that was not anticipated. If you're still in review and yeah, well, you know what? I'm going to defer to the city arborist on this question. My instinct is that if you wanted to do, you would need an update to account for this. But it I can't immediately think of a reason that would not make sense to allow, but we also may need to check in about that and follow up to confirm. Naomi, do you have any thoughts on that?
It may slow down your review. And so we're going to have to be added to the review and then do a site visit to confirm. So I don't see why not, but it may actually add more time to your review. And Jim, do you have any thoughts?
No, again, it's time and whether or not the additional costs, uh, it would be up to you to be able to do the math to see if it was worth it financially.
Let's see. So Mark asked, what are the average fees for review for one protected save tree within the LOC on a 1 unit project? Does the pilot help 50 to 80 sites or more like 30 to 50? There's two questions in that. And the first one of those is that that is that's a real hard number to answer. We're looking at probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 3,000, give or take a pretty wide margin on that. It's but we are into so in terms of the range you're looking at, we are anticipating for the $50,000 something more like in the neighborhood of 30 sites. But again, that is extremely contingent upon what is actually submitted. If everybody who participates, wants to enroll kind of the maximum amount or more of their qualifying fees, then that's one situation. But if everybody is coming in with like one 12-inch tree, like the example that Jack gave earlier, then that would apply to more sites. So it's really going to depend upon the specific applications, but I hope that gives some amount of insight.
And then
And
just to
get
note, the LOC is for single family. That is the site, the address.
Let's see. So Gabby says, will we get a notice when this goes live then? Yes, there will be a notification that goes out to stakeholders whenever this goes live. Yeah. Thanks, Mark. Appreciate your questions too. Let's see. What else we got? All right. Well, like I say, I think it's looking like everything, all the questions. So again, really appreciate everybody taking the time to come and learn more about this. And again,
I just want to
yeah,
verify one thing. It says, Gabby
okay.
says, will we get a notice when this goes live? Will there be a notice that's sent out or published in like building connections or anything like that?
Yes, there will be. We'll be shooting out a notice to stakeholders whenever the program goes live. So the specifics of that will follow up, but there will be notification of it. So it'll also be posted on the city city arborist website. And
Encourage everyone that's on the call to encourage folks to sign up for building connections, so you can get all the updates too.
Absolutely. Yeah, kind of in closing, again, like I was saying, thanks everybody. I want to reiterate that this is a pilot program. we're running the program to get feedback in order to figure out, if council wants to make the program permanent, if they, or how to improve the program. And so as we're going through this, we've already got a mechanism, if you're participating in the program, how we'll capture your feedback. But I would really encourage you, feel free to respond to us with any general thoughts that you have as well, right? Anything, even if you end up not participating, and you have thoughts about this, you're like, hey, here's why I'm not participating. This seemed burdensome, or this didn't make sense to me. I mean, that's all feedback that we are looking for. So, don't, if you're hearing all this and you dislike some aspect of the program, in some cases it may just be kind of, how we have to set it up for internal reasons, but we do want to know, because we want to the extent possible, we want to account for anything that is interfering with folks interest in participating. And we want to, if this becomes a permanent program, we want to be able to incorporate that feedback in the permanent setup of the program. So, but yeah, like I said, thanks for participating. And if you have any additional questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Yeah, I think that's all I got, Leah.
Okay, if they did want to send feedback to someone, or would that be the DSC Communications? Is that the best way, or which email?
Yes, yeah, that would go through. I think DSD Communications would be the best. Format for that.
Okay, I will put that in the chat. And just to let everybody know, we will send out a summary of this discussion today, and along with the presentation. So you can expect that probably in about a week or so. So anybody that was registered for the session today, even if they weren't able to attend, should get a copy of that. But I don't see any other hands raised or any other questions in the Q&A. So thank you all for attending today. And we look forward to see how this pilot program goes. It should be interesting to see the results.
And I want to also add, Leah, we will include the fee list that was requested whenever, at the same time that we send out that summary. So you can you'll have a copy of that.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thanks
everybody.